I don't think there's much chance of stopping development. What we want is some way of making sure that even if they're smarter than us, they're going to do things that are beneficial for us.
Think about having like a smartphone doctor, tutor, assistant in your pocket that helps you, whether it's life things, work things, etc. And to think about that wonderful opportunity for how we become more human, because we become more human through our technology.
Hello, and welcome to Washington Post Live. I'm Christina Passariello, Deputy Business Editor at the Washington Post. Today, I'm joined by Reid Hoffman, the co-founder of LinkedIn and a partner at the venture capital firm Greylock. Hoffman has been an early investor in the rapidly advancing space of artificial intelligence and actually wrote a book with the help of AI entitled Impromptu, Amplifying Our Humanity Through AI. Reid Hoffman, welcome.
Great to be here.
Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm so excited to talk about this topic because it seems like this is just really the center of the field for technology these days. We talk so much about AI and specifically generative AI, which is this new generation of AI that can create text and images, sounds and video. So you have been in this sector for a very long time. I was wondering if you could just put this moment into context for us. How big of a moment are we seeing with generative AI?
So I think artificial intelligence and generative AI is the most important tech development for kind of the world in my lifetime, and maybe it will be for my entire lifetime. It's because it builds upon the internet, it builds upon mobile, it builds upon cloud, and it's the crescendo of all of these things. I mean, there's almost a sense in which AI is the realization of the dream and the benefit of the transistor. And Steve Jobs called computers the bicycle of the mind. I actually think that AI now may be the steam engine of the mind, and as artificial intelligence is actually, in fact, amplification intelligence. And that's the reason why I wrote the first book on AI with AI, just as a kind of a demonstration piece on this.
That's so interesting. You speak so positively about AI and about its potential. There's obviously a lot of risks and concerns about it as well. Tell us why you are optimistic about AI.
Well, I think there's two things. So one is what AI is to some degree is amplification intelligence. And so just like I think there's a lot of good human beings, you guys at the Post, everyone else doing good things, being amplified is very, very good. Doctors, teachers, a whole crew of folks in order to do this. There'll be bad actors, and I actually think the real risks are on bad actor amplification, whether it's cyber criminals or terrorists or other folks, and I think that's the important thing to really pay attention to. Then people frequently talk about the kind of super intelligence thing, like the Jeffrey Hinton thing you had on the pre-video, and it's in some sense the current AIs already are. You can see the super intelligence there. GPT-4 can do a number of things, better than 99% of the human race, and yet it's still there, and it's still an amplification, and it still makes us better across a number of things. And that's the reason why I'm positive and think the super intelligence discussion diverts us from where we really should be paying attention to what the possible risks are, which is the AI in the hands of essentially bad actors, and because it's kind of what we do as a society, and good actors and bad actors, and of course there's bad actors, but we have had centuries of technological advancement, and technology always puts tools in the hands of good and bad actors, and I have the optimism that as the course of our civilization over the centuries of learning and being better and kind of figuring this stuff out, and obviously currently we're in a more of a turmoil moment, And so people go, oh, I'm not so feeling so great about the future at the moment. But it's like, well, actually, I'd much rather live now than 100 years ago. And anyone who knows about it knows that's the case. And so so that's the future that I'm trying to make sure the discourse brings us into. And part of the reason why I beat the drum so firmly in the positive camp, it's not that I'm risk unaware and I think we need to navigate them, but oh my gosh, every month we delay, an AI tutor and doctor in, for everyone who has a smartphone or is a friend who has a smartphone, just think about the human suffering that's caused by that delay. And that's super important.
That's really interesting. I mean, it really goes back to the issue of the trust in our technology. And as you pointed out, good actors have access to this technology now, as well as bad actors. And that is, in large part because there has been such a race between companies to, get these products out into the public just in the last 6 months. It's really remarkable how quickly it has changed. That, that whole process, the race which really started with OpenAI's ChatGPT, being released to the public about 6 months ago, has just massively disrupted big tech in such a short time period. OpenAI, of course, which is a very small company, has cut a massive deal with Microsoft, and Google suddenly appears behind in AI. I'll remind people that you were on the board of OpenAI and Microsoft owns LinkedIn. What do you make of these quickly shifting powers suddenly in this industry?
And also, just for the audience, I'm also on the board of Microsoft. So, just to make sure that,
You
understand where I'm speaking from. Look, I think, one of the things that Satya Nadella and the whole crew at Microsoft is showing that that the old Steve Jobs thing, which is no company can't be massively amplified and reinvented by kind of a new product. And what the whole crew there has done by recognizing and supporting the OpenAI mission, but also then building the commercial products. And these products are just, like transforming every professional activity. You process information and you do something. Doctor, journalist, educator, lawyer, engineer, graphic designer, etc., will have a co-pilot, a personal AI within 2 to 5 years that will be amplifying of their abilities. And Microsoft saw this technology, jumped on it, and started moving hard towards it. Whereas Google was kind of sitting, happy on its search, kind of dominant position, raking in the money, and was going, we're not going to do this. And they'll say, well, it's safety. There's nothing unsafe about Bing Chat. There's nothing unsafe about, kind of ChatGPT. Certainly no more unsafe than Google. He said, well, I can convince it to give me a recipe for napalm. You can find that on Google. And so the question is to say, how do we bring these into people's lives where you can go to, I just released this product Pi, I co-founded Inflection, and you can go to it and you can say, hey, my coffee maker is broken. How do I fix it? And it can help you. Or you could say, I had a really stressful conversation with the Washington Post on Live. It's not stressful. And it'll say, oh, well, how can I help you with this? And that kind of thing, that human amplification is so important in this. And that's part of what I think we're seeing. And I think Satya and the Microsoft crew have just done a stunning job of seeing the future and starting to row towards it with vigor and diligence.
That's really interesting. Definitely interesting to see Clippy, the Clippy company, be so much at the cutting edge these days of AI. You mentioned your own startup, Pi, there. So this is part of your startup called Inflection AI, with the new chatbot named Pi. Tell us why you founded this company and tell us about Pi.
So one of the things that when Mustafa Suleiman and I were talking about this, and I was going to okay, I'm going to lead this round for Greylock, and I think we have this great opportunity of creating a chatbot that's an amplification for you for your life, not just obviously the amplification of what you do in your work, that too, but it's kind of like how you navigate life. And think about the movie Her, but instead of being trained to direct your attention to it, away from your friends, it's trained to say, hey, what's going on with your life? How's your conversation with your friends? What's going on with you and your coworkers and so forth? Kind of you out in the world, and to be there as an assistant to you. And it's trained to ask you questions. So like, you go to ChatGPT, you might say, hey, how do I console a friend who's lost a treasured pet through illness or something? And it might say, oh, here's 7 things. And Pi would say, oh, you know your friend really well. What would help you be a present for your friend? What would most count? Would it be like going out for coffee, or bringing over a present, or helping them with something? Your friend asked, what do you think your friend would want? And so it'd be conversational, and that's part of that assistant, that human amplification through your life. And obviously, who doesn't like Pi, and personal intelligence, personal AI? That's the future that we saw, that we've been building towards.
Oh, that's interesting. So much of what we hear about the rollout of AI is sort of directed at the workplace as opposed to the personal use of AI. What kinds of opportunities do you think that people should be aware of in terms of how AI might change just their personal lives?
So, today, because of the way search works, there's a lot of things that people basically don't search on. So, because you have to kind of sort through all of this information, and so, it can range anything from, Friday night's coming up, I'm bored, what should I do? To, hey, I'm having a couple friends over. What might be something interesting to make for dinner? Or I have these 15 ingredients in my fridge. What can I make that's healthy? Like it's all of these things that's kind of in the fabric of your life, where it can be an amplifying assistant. And obviously, some of the things that most matter to us as people, as other people. So it's kind of the question of, oh, like I use the condolences for the loss of a kind of a pet family member as an example, and obviously there's a whole range of this. People are obviously talking a lot about mental health issues now, and these can be helpful, because it can be the, like, how do I help you find your own joy in your life and be trained that way? That's part of the thing of being trained to be helpful in you and your life. Not necessarily, like, part of the reason why on Pi we've kind of thought more subscription model than advertising model is because it's not supposed to be long interactions. They're supposed to be helpful interactions. Just like LinkedIn. Time saving, not time wasting, as a way of doing this. And I think that's it's a whole range, and people should start experimenting and doing it. For example, I give gifts to people now by going into Pi and ChatGPT and constructing like little sonnets or poems for them, because it kind of amplifies our relationship.
That's so interesting. That's a very interesting example. I know that you also used AI, generative AI, to help write your book. So tell us what that was like, and will you use it again in writing a book?
For sure. It was actually a lot of work to get, like over half the content is actually produced with GPT-4. It's a lot of work, and took a lot of different prompts and figuring it out. And even then, I'd say the GPT-4 content was good, but not as great as you'd really aspire to. And so, in the next book on AI, I'll probably have somewhat less of that content. Now, by the way, AI is improving, and this, GPT-4 is not fixed. This is not a prediction of the future, but just the next book, I think, will be more that way. And I learned all kinds of things, like, for example, when I was trying to get it to pose questions, I was still better at posing questions. I think that's one of the things that's kind of interesting in the current set. When I didn't do as much of one of the things I was thinking about, which is, are you for something and are you against it, and using that as kind of a cognitive tool for kind of resolving. And that was kind of an interesting experience. But the amplification was real. I mean, I basically started this project in early January, and the book was live mid-March.
Wow.
And so, just amazing amplification.
That's very interesting. That's really interesting. Now, of course, there is a growing chorus of critics who are calling for a pause in the development of AI technology. I mean, we saw the clip from Geoffrey Hinton, who just left Google to be able to speak freely about what he sees as the risks around generative AI. What do you think about this idea of a pause, a 6-month moratorium on the development of generative AI?
So I think it's not a very good idea. One, I don't really think I know what 6 months would get you, um, other than kind of a symbolic gesture or a PR gesture. Second is we have, this is as important as a steam engine, and it's kind of a work and life transformation across the all industries. And then I think that our tools for making it safe are stronger even in the future than in right now. And right now, we have a variety of companies that are have a lot of ties of high accountability to our society and government, like large companies that have shareholders and executives and are domiciled in the U.S. and all the rest have a large set of responsibility for what to do. And when to set up the defense, like to use cybersecurity as an example, already all the open source models can be used for a lot of cyber hacking and phishing and so forth. To set up the defense against that, you'll need to keep doing the development in order to make that happen. And so, so you're going to be safer in the future as you're doing it. That doesn't mean that in like work, a place like co-pilots and amplifications, that we won't have work transitions and we won't have to work through the work transitions in some really real ways, and be kind of learn how to adapt as industries and companies and society and that stuff. That there's real stuff there, but the better future is in the future. So like slowing down, stopping now is losing our lead, not really clear what it would do other than that, and not helping us solve these problems, which we need to get into by building them and using AI and other technologies and learnings, human learnings, as part of the solution in the future.
Right. Okay. I mean, yes, certainly the feedback that this AI gets from the use by humans does help it advance. Now, of course, Elon Musk was one of the signatories of that moratorium, but he's also trying to develop his own AI. You've known him for decades, going back to the days that you were both at PayPal. How do you interpret his moves?
So I think Elon very genuinely cares very deeply about humanity, but he tends to be a solopreneur. So just like kind of his when he stepped in as CEO of Tesla or kind of SpaceX, and so he tends to have his gut tends to be AI is only going to be safe if I make it, and I think that actually, in fact, it's better to have folks like Sam Altman who bring people in, who has actually a board of directors he actually in fact reports to, consults with various people across the safety community, brings in a group of folks in order to do this, is actually in fact a higher safety coefficient. I think Elon's very genuine and what he cares about humanity, but he tends to go I am the person that can make it happen, versus we should bring in a collaborative group, and I'm more with the collaborative group.
That's interesting. Of course, we've seen him be a solopreneur, as I think you put it, on Twitter the last 6 months. Have you spoken to him about his interest in AI right now, and does it mean that he's sort of tired from his Twitter adventure?
Well, Elon is, I think, one of the great entrepreneurs of our century, and super grateful on lots of things: cars, electrification, space rockets, etc. But as part of the solopreneur, I'm always here as a friend for him to call me, whether it's about Twitter or AI or anything else. And look, he's busy. He's doing all this stuff, so he hasn't called me. And so I haven't talked to him since before he closed the Twitter deal. Happy to help, but I think I would do it differently, whether it was Twitter or AI. So, maybe it's not. Maybe I'm not a useful phone call for him.
It sounds like you guys need an Elon bot to talk to a Reid bot, since I'm sure you're both very busy.
Yes.
All right, we're going to go to a question from the audience. We have a question from Gregory Shuckman from Maryland, and he asks, given the danger of propagating misinformation at a large scale ahead of the 2024 election, what safeguards can or should be taken with respect to generative AI? Reid, what do you think?
It's a great question, Gregory. It's one of the things that I think is part of the reason why the White House is paying attention, and in addition to its general care about governance and kind of our society, hence the recent meetings. I think the kinds of things we need to do is we need to say, well, we need to actually have a higher level of kind of validation of who the information's from. Is it from someone who is, for example, in the US case, a US citizen? Is this actually, in fact, their content that they're generating as a human being? I think we need to pay more attention to that. I think the platforms can help with that. I think we need to, kind of have, obviously we need to be attuned to the possibilities of deepfakes. Deepfakes are, where it's not just obviously language, but, you can create videos and audio. And I think, what's going to play out with that is, I think, something we have to be quite careful about. Now, all of this, I think we're going to run the experiment a little, unfortunately, just because we have difficulties as a society agreeing on what civil discourse looks like and what's an appropriate thing to do. Like if someone goes on to social media and starts yelling vaccines or a plot by the government to put chips in all human beings, we go, oh, that's fine. That's great. And they're like, well, that really degrades our response as a society to a pandemic and to all of our health and our children's health and all the rest. And I think we need to sort through that kind of stuff. And we don't really have the right discourse mechanisms for doing that. And, one of them obviously is freedom of speech and freedom of reach. And that's, again, within the AI content is, well, what gets amplified and how is that all discovered is one of the things that will matter within the electoral context. So those kinds of things we can navigate even as we discuss what the First Amendment means in terms of freedom of speech and what does that really mean? Because, by the way, we do have regulation on speech, like truth in advertising, the proverbial yelling fire in the crowded movie theater and other kinds of things, I think are things that we need to kind of to apply those principles in the modern age. So it's a great question, Gregory, and hopefully we will navigate our way through it.
I mean, it is such an interesting question and such an important question because as we've developing so quickly, you point to social media and the kinds of content moderation, and yet we see that there are that is very much an imperfect situation still so many years after social media has been very much a part of our society, even with the shootings in Texas over the weekend, that kind of content surfacing on social media and there being debate about that. So what makes you think that that there can be effective content moderation of this even bigger tool of generative AI, and that it's not just too big for these companies to actually be able to have some control over?
Well, the too big answer is fairly obvious, which is I think that any scale challenge you're trying to do, whether it's even as much as economic justice or criminal justice, medical, technology is between 30 and 80% of the answer. And so, for example, AI can help with the moderation too. So I actually think that even in places where technology provides some of the challenges or some of the new developments that we need to navigate, that's, again, not pause, go into the future. Technology can be part of the solution in order to do this. And so, obviously watching for generated AI that's trying to be politically deceptive, manipulative, et cetera. Like, for example, the Russians like to create discord within our society. That's just a better universe for them. And the fact that we have people who don't call them out on that within our media ecosystem is enormously destructive and frankly, I think anti-patriotic, because like let's not have their interference in the discourse. And I think technology can be a solution. And part of the bigness that you're referring to, well, technology is part of the answer.
I mean, it's a fascinating question, and yes, definitely seems like technology can be part of the answer. We also see that, for instance, when we're thinking about foreign disruptive propaganda, that China is an increasing force, and of course has a very robust generative AI industry as well. How are you thinking about the role that China is playing in disinformation, especially ahead of 2024?
Well, so far we've seen the Russians a lot more active than the Chinese. 2016, 2020. A little bit of China culturally tends to feel that in a stable, connected world order, they'll do well. So they tend to not like to destabilize, unlike the Russians. I'm quite certain that as we get to higher and higher levels of conflict, that question will get revisited. But I think that one of the reasons why I tend to speak about like we should compete very strongly with China, but staying connected is good, is because the kind of a connected global order is one of the things that is generally helpful, and the Chinese are generally more on the side of their doctrine of peaceful growth, and so now I would obviously like them to come out more like on peace in Ukraine and not support for the Russians in this war of aggression. But I think and obviously we're heading towards from both sides more intense conflict, which I think we need to navigate. Competition, yes. Disconnection, I think we need to be much more careful about.
Very interesting. We've meandered from generative AI to politics, so I have to ask you about the news today, which is that a verdict was just reached in the E. Jean Carroll lawsuit against Donald Trump. Trump was found liable for battery and disinformation, and this is a lawsuit that you helped finance. You helped finance Jean Carroll's lawsuit. Tell us a little bit about why you did that, and what do you make of this verdict now?
So, it is a standard practice. It happens a lot where there's outside funding of lawsuits. We didn't encourage the lawsuit to happen. We only got on board after she'd already filed it and was down the road. So you're not trying to create something that isn't substantive, real, that a person isn't really doing. My team looked at it and thought that it was her voice should be heard, that because she was challenging someone who's so much more wealthy and powerful, it shouldn't be squashed. And that, providing that voice for, people who are otherwise would be ground down by the system or the powerful is, I think, a good thing. Obviously, especially in the case of women, and obviously, especially in the case of sexual and other, kind of torture and attack so providing that support was something that I felt very happy to do. The press kind of made a big deal out of a secret. It's like, look, actually, in fact, most philanthropy in the world and most philanthropy I don't like publish lists of it. I just do it. And I think the speaking truth to power and having a woman have her voice, having a chance to be heard and not squashed through the legal courts because she didn't have the money to fully pursue it, I thought was a good thing for society, not just for her. And obviously, the point is that courts should go through their process, and the fact that the court found President Trump guilty doesn't surprise me. And I think that one of the things we stand for as Americans, a rule of law and a good judiciary process. And I think, I think it's a good showing about who Trump really is as a person, and what kinds of things he's done. And I think that's a good working of the American legal system, which is one of the things I think we're proud about in the world.
Well, Reid, that's going to have to be where we leave it. Such a timely place to close because we are out of time. Thank you so much for joining us here on Washington Post Live, Reid.
Thank you as well.
Thanks to all of you for joining us here today, too. To check out what interviews we have coming up, please head to WashingtonPostLive.com to register and find more information about all our upcoming programs. I'm Christina Passariello. Thanks again.